I'm getting too old for this sort of thing.
The good Lord lets us grow old for a reason, to gain the wisdom to find fault with everything He's made.
I've seen things people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire offshore Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near 10 hours a game.
Welcome to Not Retired Yet. If you think you're too old for this, well, you know the rest. I'm Lucas, I'm 52, and I need a job. I'm not alone. There are plenty of us out there across industries, across time zones, and across our virtual horizon. Older job seekers getting up each day and fighting the good fight because, well, we have to. We're not retired yet. This is a document of the diverse experiences we as older folks face as we look for work in 2025 and beyond. These are interesting times, indifferent times, uncertain times, and hostile times. With AI, capitalism, and careers in the late stages, I hope to shed some light on these and other areas of concern and happiness. I am talking to our fellow job seekers and sharing their stories and thoughts on a time when we should be planning our exit from the workforce, and instead, we're starting over. Today I'm talking with Will from California. Will is a product manager currently working as a consultant after getting laid off. I've worked with Will at a startup a few years ago, and we've seen eye to eye on a number of things. One of the first things Will said to me was a comment after I told him my motorcycle was from 1973, and he said, "I rolled off the assembly line that same year." Will, welcome to the show. Where are you living now?
I'm in Benicia, California, which is about 45 minutes to San Francisco if there's no traffic, but there always is. So it's about an hour on BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit, which is what I, for the most of my career, would do. Like living here, I loved it here. This is the town I grew up in, but it was also awesome being young, starting a career, and having access to the salaries of San Francisco. Return to like a house with a backyard. That was like super awesome. And it made it really amazing early on in my career because there are so many different kinds of companies that, like, initially I talked about like Schwab, Wells Fargo, et cetera. When I pivoted and went into digital agency work, there's a bunch of digital agencies there. So, you know, I worked at AKQA SF, Razorfish. I worked at a smaller digital agency called Thought Matrix. So whatever kind of work I wanted, there were available jobs there, and they paid well.
And what are you doing now?
Now I've worked with the CEO, Hidemi at Catalyst Community for about almost, this will be 7 months. Her partner, I worked with for a couple of years at Salesforce, and he was incredible. Like, he was awesome at what he did. He, you know, it's one of those situations we're talking about being older. I made a career change of going from like being a lead business analyst to product manager, and he, you know, mentored me through that process at Salesforce. So I was hired on as a business analyst. I knew another person on the team from previous work, and he's like, you know, why don't you go for product management? Like, you're halfway there already. You know, you're running the engineering teams that we had for replatforming Salesforce.com. There was a team of 6, so it was easy to be distributed. But even in that context, he was like one of the heavy hitters there for that. And the two of them combined still have to work incredibly hard to keep the business moving the way that they want it to. It's had explosive growth. Like it really just started with one person, Hidemi, and she had a concept of having like a boutique consulting firm that's specializing in the things that she specialized in initially, which was like product management, UX research, and sort of business operations and coaching. And then her partner had like essentially a lot of those in a Venn diagram lining up, also product manager, also did like the kind of stuff that I do and that we all do, like product ownership, product management. But both of them being like some of the smartest people I've ever worked with, and seeing what it takes to, simultaneously work, which they're doing, and also running a business. I would be hard pressed to say which side of that requires more time. And that's the thing, maybe requires more time, but maybe can't always get it right when you're actually in the fray and doing the work. While growing a business and bringing on the right people, that's another key aspect of this. It is so daunting. I would hard nope out of that.
That's kind of where you're working now. Is that right? It's almost like a part-time gig, or it's part-time work. It's not quite padding out the bills. Was there a stepping stone in between Catalyst and where you were before? Or did you kind of go right from where you were before into Catalyst?
Yeah, it's an interesting story because I think it's really the topic of your podcast, right? Like I am older, 51.
Yeah.
I've been, not to toot my own horn, but like I've been sort of at the top of my game since my early 30s, right? I was a consultant in financial services in my late 20s, early 30s.
Right.
So I was used to working at like a really high caliber, and at that time, it was weird because like the world was our collective oyster, in that if you were successful at financial services in San Francisco, there was like Wells Fargo, Barclays, Charles Schwab, Mellon Capital, all of these places, and they were ruthless. It's another trend that I wanted to talk to you about, because the way that I got jobs before when I was younger was they would say, okay, here's the job, here's the rec. If you do well, then you can stay here, and if you don't, you're out. And to me, there was a lot more firing back in the day, which also conversely meant that hiring wasn't such an onerous and potentially sort of like it had less weight to hire somebody and potentially fire them, which meant that if you were good, that meant it was easy to get a job, and if you proved yourself out, then you just you build a network. You have people that I remember being like at Schwab or Wells Fargo, and people at whichever other company calling and saying, hey, if you want, back in the day, it was like I was making like $65, $70 an hour working financial services, and they'll say, hey, they'll poach you. They'll give you an extra $10 an hour if you're willing to come over. And so that was sort of the tenor of my career up until the last few years, where it's been incredibly difficult.
You had some really interesting answers when I asked you about any challenges that older people had to work, and I'd like to get into those here in a minute. But you also had like a really cool answer that I've been thinking a lot about actually for the past week, about any of the assets that we have. Do you remember what that was?
Not offhand. I mean, I think to kind of paraphrase what I remember writing is that a lot of what makes us as like seasoned workers valuable is we know what works well, and we've paid the frickin' price on things that don't work out well. And the two are indistinguishable when you're younger. I remember a lot of the time when I was first learning Agile, I thought, okay, here's this cool thing we can do, and the engineers will understand it better, and it's not Agile, but it's going to work. And then it blows up in your face. You're like, oh shit, okay, I'm never going to do that again. And I know that, and I know the whys around that, and how that happens. And it really is. It really is. I do remember it was the Blade Runner thing. Like, I've seen things you people wouldn't believe, and it's true.
So I've used this clip in my intro to this podcast.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain. Time to die.
How Roy kind of spits the word people, you people wouldn't understand, is really like that really kind of struck me when I was re-listening to it, as he is othering everybody else, saying people because he is not a people.
Yep.
He's an AI. And that's and like being able to bring that to as kind of like this symbol of older people looking for work is something that I maybe kind of shoehorned a little bit toward, took my poetic license a bit too far with it, but you could almost see that Roy Batty is like this, is an older worker, and he's got all these experiences. He's saying attack ships off the shoulder of Orion. He's got sea beams, Tenhauser Gate. We've got Salesforce. We've got your experience with Audi. You've got the startup experience, and all these things. I mean, are they now lost? Are they now tears in the rain?
For a lot of people out there, frankly, like that's the epiphany I reached in my most recent work. But I 100% believe that if I'm applying to senior product manager positions, which would be like not the level that I was at that company, at a smaller company that's doing less complex things than what I was doing daily there across sometimes 3 accounts. There's something going on there. I'm not entirely sure. We talked about this before. There's like sort of this AI war of like ATSs that are the gatekeepers into these companies for potential resumes, and there's hundreds of AI resumes and cover letters flying around, and there's a lot of boasting that happens in resumes. I've heard this from recruiters where somebody might be relatively low level on an account, but if you read the resume, you would think that they were like the executive lead on the account. So for me, it's a tough pill to swallow, and I don't know how this happens. Like, we both kind of acknowledge that there's a level of opacity here where we, as sort of like pieces in the game, can't see the whole board. But like we were talking about before, my last account at AKQA, I was working on Tanger.com, which is this huge they have those outlet malls all through the South. They recently IPO'd. I built their website and application with a rather large team, and came in under budget and before scheduled. And while I was doing that, I was working on like Capital One Travel and Masters tournament, which like a lot of people at the company were like, "Oh, you're on the Masters account," and I was the only product manager across these accounts. So to me, when that's sort of the norm, or like Salesforce.com, there were six of us that re-platformed Salesforce.com. These are like huge to me, not to toot my own horn, or like you said, Audi USA. These are large accounts where I had a lot of responsibility, and I don't know why, having that kind of background, it becomes impossible to get a job at like a startup that's the size of the one you and I worked at, right? And that's the other thing, is that that you kind of hinted at before. There's a range here. Like, I've worked at companies as big as Salesforce and Charles Schwab and Wells Fargo, and it's companies as small as where we worked, where I was employee number 11 at a startup. So again, it sounds like I'm tooting my own horn a lot here, but if I can work at a startup with 11 people and build it to 130, and as you know, we launched from 0 to 1. We went from pre-seed to 45 million. We had Google and Microsoft as clients, and launching also Salesforce.com. Why it is difficult for me to get a job at a again mid-sized startup is perplexing to me.
Yeah, definitely. There's, that, and this is, I think your experience is not uncommon, especially around older job seekers who do have all this like really really relevant and really cool experience building these building these like enterprise level applications, as well as building up teams from being employee number 11 at a startup. And there's a gap there between what we think our experience is worth and what any hiring manager is thinking our experience is worth. You said, and I want to touch a little bit about the specific phrasing that you used when you said AI war. That seems like a very kind of poignant phrase. Do you want to talk a little bit more about why you said AI war?
Yeah, to me, again, having some friends and colleagues that are recruiters and looking at what they're facing, and I'm sure you've seen it too on LinkedIn. There could be an application, or rather a job posting with 2 days where it's been posted, and there's like 900 applicants. Like, I I've talked about this with some other job seekers. It's like, if I, maybe it was even with you, but if I were hiring a developer and you are resume 974, and I knew you and your name was removed, would I even know that that was you? I don't think so. Like, we worked together for years. I know your strengths. I know what you do well. I know a lot of the tool set, but how am I going to be able to spot your resume out of all of those? It becomes, it's literally impossible, right? And that's where these ATSs come in. So if I knew that you were the perfect fit for the job and I described your attributes, you might not get past that ATS, right? Because there's, potentially thousands of other resumes that have fired through that system. So they're going to cull it down. And now, to me, when you look at a pool that big, it really doesn't matter what the actual skills of the person is, right? At that point, it's a numbers game. So on the applicant side, that part of the war is, instead of me, like, I was thinking of, like, when I was leaving Salesforce, I would vet a company before I applied, because there was an implication that, like, if I'm gonna apply to that company, it better be a company that I want to work at. And it wasn't, based on name. When you're in technology long enough, you could kind of suss out what kind of shop it is. Like, is this a good place to? You look at Glassdoor, you see what the developers say, you see what everyone else says, you look at their place in the market, like are they a stable all of those things are things that I would do, because I also knew that if I submitted my application, there was a really good chance that I would get at minimum an interview. And maybe they're looking for somebody else. Maybe it's not a great fit. I've done that too, where I interviewed well, and then I kind of got a suspicion that it might not be the best fit for me. So all of that's gone now, because it's just like barrages of resumes, and then you reach a mindset like of, if you can't beat them, join them, right? Like you then do the instead of actually looking at the company and saying, hey, company X, I looked at your website, I like what you're doing, here's my background, this is why I think I'm a good fit. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or want to schedule an interview. It then turns into, fire out a standard cover letter, or have AI tweak it, do the same with your resume, and just shotgun it out, because if you don't, then you're not going to hear anything. And that's sort of when, and we spoke about this also recently, where I've pretty much given up on looking in that way, in using LinkedIn or Indeed,
Yeah.
and just using my network, which is like, frankly, how I got my last two jobs, including this one.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so much more lucrative for those kind of high value work, those high value jobs, to be able to look in that, so you're not just shotgunning your resume out to these organizations that you don't know anything about. They don't know anything about you, and your ATS, which is the applicant tracking system, that most like enterprises use for to filter out less qualified candidates. So we've got about 5 minutes left here on this particular Zoom, and if we can continue this if needed. But I definitely want to talk about one other thing when we spoke earlier that really struck out to me, and when I asked you how many more years do you have left working, and your answer was surprising to me, because you gave some examples of family members that were kind of stood up as people that like kind of worked until they attributed their long life or their life to like not ever stopping working. Do you feel like that is something that you adhere to as well? That you will always be working, that you're never going to be like retired, quote unquote, retired?
I'm still wrestling with it. It was like the question that I paused on the most from your questionnaire, because I can honestly say I don't know the answer. Mainly because I think that both of us found the kind of work that we love. Like what I'm doing, like today, we met late because there was a bunch of things to do on the client side for this client. I enjoy doing that, like going in and untangling and helping another company profit and grow and do better through process changes that are there. It's not me doing it in the end. I'm working with them. They have to do it, and when they do it and they reap those rewards, that is freaking awesome. It's really enjoyable to do that, and to do it with other like-minded people. At the company that I'm at, that we're all problem solvers. Like that's just in our blood. And the way that the company is set up, and the way that their philosophy really is not to work for them or for the money that you're going to get. It's to work in a way that you can live the life that you want to live. And that it really did open up doors for me, because I love traveling, and traveling, as you know, is expensive. But if I can work in Madrid, where one of our colleagues is living right now, for 3 months, like how cool would that be to like,
Very cool.
Yeah, do that for 3 months. I'm funding the work, outside of my house. I could bring the family along. And then I think of like what I would do if I had just all the time to myself. Like vacations are nice, I love them, but there is absolutely a part of me that derives benefit from work. And it's something I think we, like, again, people wired like us have to actively combat, is to not derive too much from it, right? Like the rest of your life should be the most important part. The, time with family, it's that saying that like nobody on their deathbed says they wish they worked more hours.
Right.
To me, that's very much the case. And you have kids, I have kids, like you're trading, right? Like you're trading time to work versus time with them. And like achieving that balance is something where we no longer have to think of it that way, which is awesome, right? Like my father, who was the one that I referred to that had to retire early, it was just a rule. Like he had worked 25 years at Mare Island Shipyard. When he worked 25 years, you no longer get paid. Like, hey, you're retired. Like they'll give you a small amount to keep working, but it was like a ridiculously small amount. So he's like, I'm done. And
you got to get out of the way.
Yeah. And we don't have to do that. I could choose, even in my current position, if we have multiple clients globally, and that sounds huge, and it is, but it's all like right now it's still early phase where we have, clients in different industries and doing different work and requiring different amounts of effort. So if I told them that I want to work 5 hours a week, they'd find something where I could work 5 hours a week indefinitely.
Well, that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing to have, like, and that's kind of a North Star for a lot of us, I think. Well, I'm going to have to end it here. So thank you so much for being on the show. And I'm sure I'll talk with you soon.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Lucas.
Thank you, Will. There's so much that we didn't cover in this podcast that Will and I discussed previously. Family and mental state of older job seekers, two important topics that we just didn't have time for. This interview was conducted over Zoom from Seattle, Washington, and Benicia, California. If you have questions or comments, please reach out to me via email at lucas.smith.development@gmail.com. And until next time, keep fighting the good fight. I will, because I'm not retired yet.